Right, we've arrived at Gatwick Airport, so everything's going well so far, but unfortunately we were then told that we would have to load up the aeroplane and then sit on the apron for 2 hours because there'd been a delay.
Hello. I take the opportunity of these unusual circumstances to take a picture through there.
Sorry, sir. Can't hear you. I want to take a picture, sir. If you ask the captain.
Oh, yes. Would you mind having your picture taken for the viewers?
I don't mind. Yeah,
I don't mind. Pass a little time, you know, 40 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, I'll just say this gentleman can take a picture of me.
Oh, a lady captain as well. Oh, how lovely.
I'm a first officer, sir.
I worked with someone who flew many years ago for Air UK.
Oh, yes.
Probably never even heard of it.
Oh, no, I remember Air UK very well, yes.
Yes, so she came to us as second after she retired. Eh?
I'm older than I look, I remember Air UK.
Oh, yeah? You got, yes, I always thought that was a bit... Now, unfortunately, I missed your explanation.
As far as I can gather, they're doing some work on the runway at Catania. Yeah. That means they've closed the runway for an hour over
just tarmacking work, I presume.
No, they're building a new taxiway there, and I think that's acting. They've had to close the runway, so the runway's closed from 11:30 to 12:30 on February the 6th.
Well, they would have to pick today, of course.
For what it's worth, it's all of this week. So that means there's a backlog of aeroplanes to go there. And it's also, because it's quite a small airfield, they can only accept so many airplanes per hour. Or they might decide not to do it at all. Yeah, two should don't know.
They should say that. They might hear you. Oh, at least it's given us the opportunity to see what goes on.
I've flown down there half a dozen times now, but I've never actually gone off and seen Sicily. We can just go in and out.
Yeah, this is
it looks very interesting flying it. It's not going to be so good today because it's quite cloudy out there today.
Well, at last we're on the good end of the runway. We've been followed by a Virgin Atlantic. Right, seatbelts fastened. Here we go. Now, as you probably know, during the 11th century, the Normans were in the process of taking over southern Italy. Before that process was really complete, they had started to cast eyes over Sicily. Now, Sicily at that time was ruled by the Arabs, and there were at least 4 major emirates in the island.
A route today takes us via Genoa, along the west coast of Italy.
Yes, 4 major emirates in the island, centred mainly at Trapani, Agrigento, Syracuse, and of course Palermo. All these were nominally subject to the Sultan Zirid of Mehdia in North Africa. The ties were fairly loose, I believe. Now then, here we are, we're almost there. Time passes quickly. Now that's Catania Airport then. There are some taxis, coaches, but where is the bus stop for the local bus into town? Just a corporation transport ride of 20 minutes.
The 4 Arab Emirates that were mentioned were at Palermo, Trapani, Agrigento and Syracuse. We'll be based at Catania and hope to see Syracuse, go up to Taormina. Mount Etna is a possibility, and if so we'll stop at Randazzo on the way round. It would also be nice to see Piazza Armerina, and especially it would be nice to possibly hire a car and come down this way and see Noto, Modica and Ragusa.
But let's get straight off to Syracuse, or Syracuse as we call it. We're travelling down the east coast and soon arrive in Syracuse. The Greeks had planted colonies throughout this area, and Syracuse was probably one of the main Greek cities. When not fighting the Phoenicians, the Greeks fought each other. They introduced the olive and the vine, corn grew in the central plains, and sheep grazed the hillsides. Now the station is right up that road there, but we're coming down here towards the bridge which crosses over into the old part of Syracuse called Ortigia. Our first evidence we're going to find of the Greeks is the Temple of Apollo, which was probably one of the first great Doric temples to be built in Sicily in the 7th or 6th century BC. Now I know it was February, but I was quite surprised to see snowflakes in there at this time. And there we have the Syracuse branch of the store. Up Corso Matteotti into Piazza Archimede, where we can find this 20th century fountain which represents the nymph Arethusa, who is the symbol of Ortigia at the moment of her transformation into a spring.
Just come down this dodgy alleyway to have a look at Palazzo Montalto, which as far as I could make out is this here. Standing in this little, so with what one may call ordinary accommodation.
We're going to make our way now up to Piazza Duomo to see the famed Cathedral of Syracuse with its fantastic Roman Baroque facade. But we find another church first. Just look at the big columns on the side of this Duomo, this cathedral which we're now looking at. Those big columns there are the columns from the original Greek temple, which was built around 530 BC, and they've just been incorporated into the church. We're looking across the square at the various Baroque buildings. There's the Municipio, and across the road Thank you. We've got a palazzo from the Baroque era. And there we are, at last, the famous facade of Syracuse Cathedral. Now there are the columns again, the big Doric columns inside. They've just been incorporated. Now the inner wall of the Greek temple here has just had archways punched into it to form the nave. We'll have a look in a minute at those columns and see how close this whole thing came to collapse in the 17th century earthquake, which actually demolished the Norman facade, which of course was replaced by that Baroque one we've just seen. Incidentally, that's a Norman font carved out of one block of stone which still has its Greek inscriptions on it. Now look at this column here, how that's bent over and nearly collapsing, or it was. Now these are some patterns on the walls formed by the high windows with the sun coming straight through them. And there's your candy twist Baroque columns added. Now then, not convicts, but men who are apparently replacing the whole of this street paved area and stretching from up there right down to here onto the seafront. And then we shall see just down here the fountain of Arethusa, or should I say the spring of Arethusa. We've seen the fountain up there, the 20th century model. Now this is the actual spring of Arethusa. This is where the nymph Arethusa rose after swimming across the Peloponnese, after being metamorphosed into the spring by the goddess Artemis. Nelson took water on board here on his way to the Battle of the Nile. That's a representation again of Arethusa. Now if we just walk away to our right here, we shall come to the castle at the end of the point. This is Castello Maniaci, built in 1239 by Frederick II, and it's named after the Byzantine admiral who briefly reconquered Syracuse from the Arabs in 1038. Just have a look at the sea. So right on the seafront here. There we are. We don't see much of the more modern part of Syracuse except on our way to and from the station and up to the Greek theatre, but it is worth remembering that in 1942-43, after the Allied invasion of Sicily, Syracuse was bombed first by our side to dislodge the Germans, and then when we occupied it, the Germans bombed it. During the Second Punic War, Syracuse, along with most of the Sicilian cities, sided with the Carthaginians against Rome. This is where Archimedes deployed his ingenious contrivances against the Romans, and where he was hacked to death by one of the Roman soldiers assisting in the regime change. Now this is the church of San Martino, one of the oldest in Syracuse. It was originally a 6th century basilica. Notable people from the main world of Greece, such as Pindar and Aeschylus, were invited here by the tyrant of the day, in this case Hiron the First, 478 to 466 BC. And we're going to walk up now to the Greek temple, the Greek theatre area, which is across town. Aeschylus probably witnessed here the production of his last plays, Prometheus Bound and Prometheus Unbound. Plato was in Syracuse as tutor to Dionysius II, 367 to 343 BC. This is one of the biggest Greek theatres still existing. Now up at the top there we can see the Nymphaeum, the votive niches for offerings to the gods. Now down that road there is where they carted people off to be buried, and these are the ruts made by the carts over the centuries, so I'm told. Now back to the gatehouse and into the other side, which is really the disused quarry, now a garden and lemon grove. See, real lemons, I can almost... not quite. These quarries were often used to house prisoners. It was a sort of Guantanamo Bay of its time. It housed people that the tyrant didn't like. There is called the Ear of Dionysius, and in this cave he would put people, either prisoners of war or people he didn't like, and listen from outside to what they were saying because of the acoustics. "7,000 Greeks were held in these quarries when they sent the great expedition against Syracuse." Now on the way out of the whole area we passed the altar of Hiron II. I won't say what he boasted about doing there. And the Roman amphitheatre. And time for the train back to Catania. On the television that night there was some interesting news about quite heavy snowfalls, and perhaps I will go up towards Etna after all, probably up there somewhere, see if I can find it.